Hello, welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast, the PGA edition. I am your host, Brian Mears. I'm joined, as always, by Peter Jennings, aka CSU Ram 88, and Colin Davey. And this week, excited to bring back the legend, Drew Stoltz, aka the Sleaze. Got so many good reactions that we had to bring him back on. Drew, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. Happy to be back. Thank you, boys, for extending the invitation.
Of course, yeah. If we'll see how it goes. We have some good picks, some bad picks. We'll get into that for sure. Let's start talking about last week's Honda Classic. It ended up being quite a crazy week. Some of the chalk on DraftKings really busted. Not a whole lot of lineups with 6 of 6 that made it through in tournaments, which made the weekend pretty interesting. But we have JT just winning all the tournaments. The dude is just crushing over the last year. Let's start with him, sort of talk about takeaways from last week. Pete, I'll kick to you. What are your thoughts on JT and just his dominance right now?
Well, the secret's out on JT, which is a bummer for me. I've been rostering JT for the last year, and that's been one of the only things that I feel like I've constantly gotten right. Sets up beautifully on DraftKings in terms of how he scores, especially in tournaments like we just had. He's number one in making birdies over the last year on par fours. Obviously, he's a volatile golfer, but still one of the best in the world, so that sets up extremely well just for scoring. But now the secret's out completely. He's one of the most heavily owned or heavily priced golfers, and I imagine his ownership is going to start to tail with all the success that he's having. The most interesting tidbit from the weekend, though, well, there's two things I thought were amazing. One of them was he yelled "fuck yeah" after he won the tournament, which they kept playing over and over again, which I thought was funny. And the second thing that's caused quite a lot of media attention is he kicked out a fan for yelling at his ball to go in the bunker. I don't think there's enough context overall with everyone talking about this, but I wanted to kick the Sleaze for his opinion on kind of the whole ordeal. A lot of the guys at Barstool and other media outlets are calling him soft, but apparently the fan had been heckling him the whole time and was also heckling List. So Sleaze, what's it like when there's someone out there, just talking a lot of crap out of the fans?
Well, the biggest gallery I ever had consisted of my mom and my dad and like one butt and my caddy. So I didn't get a whole lot of heckling going on while I was out there. So I can't really relate to having thousands of people follow me around and, rooting for or against me on every shot. But I think the thing with JT is getting a bit overblown. Like he's catching some heat for this, which surprises me because JT, from what I know, and I don't know him well, but I do have a bunch of friends that speak really highly of him. He's not the kind of guy that's like looking to overreact and snap on a fan who says one thing or something like that. Like he's a pretty mellow guy. You can kind of tell in all his interviews and stuff. He's kind of the cool young kid. He along with like Spieth and Ricky and some of these guys. And I don't think they're out there trying to just throw guys out for no reason. So if there's a guy that's this constantly, from what it sounded like, it wasn't just a one-off incident on that one hole. It was like hole after hole after hole. This guy was rooting against him. And when it gets to a point eventually, I think, where it's like, all right, dude, we're on the 15th, 16th hole. I'm trying to win a golf tournament here. I got $1 million plus on the line. And if there's one dude in there that keeps yelling during my swing or right after my swing or whatever it is, it's like enough's enough. And I would think if I was in the gallery and this was happening, you would hope that maybe they would handle it on their own and get the guy to shut up or whatever. But if they don't do it, I think at that point in the round, it's probably in JT's and Luke's best interest just to get the guy out of there. So I think he's catching way too much shit for having this guy tossed. It sounds like it was just one bad apple out there. And if he's doing it over and over and over, that's totally different than one guy saying something stupid in a one-off situation. So I think it was handled fine. I think he's catching way too much shit for it, and I don't think it's a big deal. I think it happens way more than you think. It just happened to be final round Sunday, final pairing type of deal that why it's getting the attention that it's getting.
Quick question on JT as a golfer, Sleaze, and we'll kick it to Colin as well. Where is he in terms of just world ranking for you? Obviously now I think he's up to 3 in the world and he's number 1 in the FedEx Cup, but random golf tournament tomorrow, nothing about the course, who are you taking ahead of JT and where does he rank for you right now?
Yeah. And so for JT, for me, he's always been a guy that I thought his good golf, he had enough offense to beat anybody in the world at any given week, assuming he was on. The one downside to him was that he probably just didn't have those weeks as frequently as some of these other guys do. And now I think you're starting to see that he's way more consistent than he used to be. Like, not only is he rattling off these wins, like he's got crazy wins the last year and into this year as well. So he's starting to win at a higher clip, but also like you just see it more like top 10s and top 20s consistently. You're not seeing as near as many of these 45ths or miscuts or things like that. I think he's just really kind of coming into his own and figuring out his golf game. But in terms of who I would take in front of Justin Thomas, like in the world, just on a random week, I mean, for my money, Dustin Johnson, if all things are clicking, that I don't see a guy really that can mess with Dustin. If everything is dialed in, and he hasn't had the huge wins, like Rory had the monster win at Congressional where he lapped the field right at the opener. He's had some big wins by huge margins. Dustin hasn't really had, I guess, as many of those. But for me, when that guy's driving the ball well and the way he puts it and things like that, like he's got to be my number one. And then right after that, I put Rahm and Spieth in there. Just Spieth's consistency last year and his ability to have these big wins when he gets going. Rahm, in terms of what he's done in the one full year that he's been on tour, I got to put him up there. And then after that, I think it's, Thomas, Jason Day, maybe you throw Hideki in there as well. But I think he's right in that third to fourth. I think he's appropriately ranked right now, probably around third, fourth. That's probably where I'd have him. After Dustin and probably John Rahm, he'd be right in that next mix for me.
We have so many good golfers right now. I mean, it's crazy. Colin, get in here. What are your thoughts on everything we've talked about, and particularly just like some ownership from last week? It ended up being that these top guys, JT was less than 20% in the $33 dog leg. Ownership was pretty evenly distributed, but overall, people elected to go more balanced than to get up to the top guys.
Yeah. As a brief aside, I wanted to thank Sleeves for coming back. I really appreciated your sterling takes last week. Like, don't take Jamie Lovemark in the win. That high ball flight is something to worry about. I think
we're starting it now.
A pretty bad finish. So, other guys that fit the bill. I mean, it's one small sample size. You got guys like Luke List too, who hit the ball like really well, have a high apex height. He only finished second. So. Thank you for that, critical insight inside the ropes.
Anytime, but that's what I'm here for. To offer these little gems, these little tidbits that you can't find in the computers, bro. That's what I'm here for.
No, but this kind of goes back to my point where it's like it was genuinely interesting angle to consider. Apex height is not included in most traditional metrics. Maybe it does make a difference, but if that were if your angle is true, then I feel like that you should be able to, if that's a consistent, repeatable thing, you should be able to see guys that consistently outperform or underperform in high wind versus low wind. Keep coming back to, I can't prove it statistically. So you're just coming at it from another angle. Going forward, I think I'm sticking with my guns here about it is effectively impossible to find good or bad wind players. And you can't, and yet intuitively, I believe your angle where there are good people, maybe it's like a clutch hitting type of thing where in your bones, it does exist. You just can't prove it statistically. And that becomes it's just, I just can't give it a whole lot of weight because it's so tough to prove. The win specialist is so tough to prove statistically. So that's what I've been thinking about mostly. As far as the ownership this week, it was, you didn't get any super heavy hitters, like a 30%er. And maybe that kind of makes sense because there's no one who had dominant history here aside from Ricky Fowler. But even then it wasn't all that dominant. I mean, he was pretty chalky, but he was also pretty expensive to boot. And we always say fade the chalk here, especially in a high random environment, like a high win game. There shouldn't be any chalk. So I think that is exactly the time to fade the chalk. And sure, there's low scores all over the place, but you don't need a high score to win a GPP. You just need the best score. So don't worry about it. Everyone else is subject to the same stuff. I think this is exactly the type of week that you want to capitalize on when the chalk gets blasted across the board. I think we all like JT going in. I think I basically agree with Pete. The secret's out. As far as I basically agree with Sleaze's rankings right now. Maybe DJ head to head on this famed, neutral course, kind of any day of the week type of thing. But as we know, there is no such thing as a neutral course on tour, and everywhere's got to get played somewhere, and everywhere has different adjustments at the individual level. But we'll get into that for this week in Mexico.
How do you rank Rahm, Spieth, and JT? Because I think that is the next appropriate tier.
I think JT and DJ are about even. Like, you could talk me, the line between them is so close at this point that you could go either way. After that, let's see, who else? I think it's Spieth at a next level after that. And I actually have Rahm down a little bit below that. I have a couple guys in between them that we haven't talked about. Here's some. Let me do the British invasion hot take. I could get talked into either Justin Rose or Paul Casey above Jon Rahm right now.
No,
you're out of here. This is where you lose all your credibility, dude. Throwing out stuff like that.
So Colin, I think the issue is that, like, just a general ranking like that doesn't incorporate range of outcomes. Like, we're talking ceiling versus floor, and I think your take is that, like, Rose and Casey have a higher floor than Rahm, but Rahm's ceiling is like, what was it, that tournament like last year? Like, he won by like 18 strokes or something. It was something ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, so like he can absolutely explode like that, kind of like a Jason Days of yore. But one of the sneaky things we don't talk about Rahm is like, it sounds asinine, but he just doesn't have as many top 25s as a player of his caliber, quote unquote, should. I guess, like, anecdotally, you could talk about maybe some like head case instances where, like, when he blows up, and that just knocks him down. And he's not able to, maybe when he's not going to win, he still can't finish in the top 25. So from like an equity standpoint, like, it is something that's worth pricing in. You can observe it enough times where, like, he just scores like maybe like 10, 15 DraftKings points less than he quote unquote should. And like that does affect your rostering decision or maybe even your heads up decision.
So you could have said that about JT like a year and a half ago. Like, do you think Rahm could be on the precipice of, like, becoming what JT is now?
I mean, I could see that. I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's a statistical backing for that conviction, but like, yeah, in terms of like arc and storyline, like, sure, that can make sense. So, I'm sure Sleaze and Pete's blood is boiling right now. So
I mean, I tuned you out like 2 minutes ago, dude. I just stopped listening. I don't want to pollute my brain with this trash. Like, to say that, like, Rahm doesn't have enough top 25s to, like, rank him wherever you rank him. Like, the guy has literally 1 year of stat. He's been on the PGA Tour full member for 1 year. And so I was digging in, doing some little numbers.
I'm not talking about lifetime. I'm talking about in his window.
Dude, he's played 30 events since he won last year. 19 of those are top 20s. 12 of them are top 10s, and there's 4 wins. Like, I don't know. You can find another guy that's catapulted from wherever he was ranked at the beginning of last year to number 2 in the world. I mean, that doesn't happen by not finishing in the top 25. The guy is in contention every time. And to throw out like Paul Casey, God bless him, he's a great. Paul's an awesome player. Justin's an awesome player, but they haven't done half of what Rahm's done. So to rank them, especially in the last year, which is really the only data you have on Rahm, to put those two above Rahm in that category is asinine to me. Like, what do I know? I don't have a computer, dude. I'm just going eyeball and actual results, not friggin' greens and reg and all that stuff.
Yeah, to tease the Playing the Tips pod, I think we're going to have a bet with Rahm versus Casey, Rahm versus Rose for wins on tour this year.
I'm in.
Thanks, Sleaze.
I like it.
Double mortgage my house. Auction off my firstborn child and put it all on Rahm.
Long term, I'd still probably take Rahm. I'm just kind of going. I mean, rankings
but
are always
current day. You like Rose and Casey over Rahm?
Current course, no. I would still take Rahm this week over either one of them heads up if the price was even. But like, if we shade the line, like, yeah, I could get talked into a like Rose over Rahm, Casey over Rahm, given not that much more line shading.
I sent some backpedaling from Colin. We got him.
It seems like, it's really hard to get a definitive yes.
None of you understand nuance.
Exactly. We don't. So you got to dumb it down and just take a stance.
All right. One other thing, real quick, before we dive into this week's, Tiger played incredible last week. That's got to be great for golf. Obviously, I think a big factor is he was a little bit more comfortable just being in Florida. I think that might have been an underrated element last week, but played incredibly well on a really tough course. I mean, Sleeves, I can see why your career ended there. Just watching it, I mean, there's water everywhere. I don't think I could break 100 at that course as like an 8 or 9 index. So to see Tiger play well there, I was extremely impressed. Colin, what's your outlook on Tiger going forward? I think he has a chance to be competitive, and someplace like Augusta, the Masters, he definitely could be relevant.
Yeah, I think I want to wait for like maybe 1 or 2 more weeks before I even form a proto data opinion on Tiger. But if he's coming out like that strong out of the gate, like sure, I could see him like basically debuting at like maybe like a Zach Johnson or a like Jason Duffner level, which like for all the layoff, like that's not that bad considering like everything we know about his injury. Like that's still, top 50 in the world, where it was questionable whether or not he'd be able to, hold a golf club again. So rostering is a separate question. I think we can kind of all see that his price will be inflated because it's Tiger frickin' Woods. But that's the more interesting question to me. Will he ever be rosterable enough with enough equity? My guess would probably be no. That's another interesting prop bet. Like, will Pete ever roster Tiger this year? Like with a serious investment.
The best thing that DraftKings can do is price Tiger, not like way too cheap, but cheap enough where he makes sense to roster. That's the best thing.
Yes, I agree.
Sell out all the contests. Like people want to root for Tiger. I was rooting. I was fading Tiger from a financial perspective. And I was still rooting for him. Sleaze, you've obviously seen Tiger throughout all this, and I think you'd have a pretty decent gauge of where his golf game's at. Obviously, we're short him this week, which I think made sense given how erratic he's been with the driver. But did you see anything last week that gave you confidence about him going forward?
Oh, everything I saw gave me confidence about him going forward. I was absolutely floored with how good he looked this past week. I think if anybody said like, yeah, we saw this coming or whatever, then they're just blowing smoke, because I don't think there's any way you could predict it that Tiger Woods would go out and lead the field on a golf course like that in proximity to the hole, which is tough to do because to hit it close to the holes, obviously you got to be hitting fairways. I think it played a little bit differently in the fact that he didn't hit quite as many drivers as I thought he was going to have to hit out there. When I played out there, I was hitting dog on every hole, but Tiger's hitting it about 30 further than I was at the time. So, he was able to hit more 3-woods and some irons and stuff like that, which obviously got him in position. But even when he did pull out the driver, like on 6, which is one of the hardest driving holes on the PGA Tour, with the lake left, bunkers right, and he was just hitting these hammers down there. I was like floored by the way he was swinging it. And it just looked more self-assured. Like he looked confident in it. He looked like he was going at it. I don't know if you guys saw the club head speed numbers that they were putting up there. I don't know if those are real or not, but if he's legitimately swinging the club on Saturday at 128 miles an hour and he finds out how to hit it on the map, like that's a huge problem for the rest of the field, because he was hitting his irons. He was hitting his irons unbelievable, obviously first in proximity. I think that type of deal, like in Florida where you got a little bit of breeze to deal with, and he starts hitting like shots, and he starts maybe taking an extra club and flighting it down and doing things like that. I think that's the best thing he can do, because I think his bad swings come when he's trying to swing too hard a lot of the time, which you see with like the drivers and stuff like that. So I was blown away by it. No one would be happier than to see Tiger Woods start popping up there on the leaderboard on Sunday. It would be enormous for golf. And I think we'll get to see him one more time before the Masters at Bay Hill, obviously, where he's won a million times. But God, I mean, if he plays even halfway close to the way he played at PGA National this week, the hype train rolling into Augusta is going to be real, and it is going to be loud, and it's going to be fun. I want to see these young guys like Justin and stuff like that have to stare Tiger down on a Sunday the same way Phil and Ernie and those guys that have like immense scar tissue built up from having to stare down Tiger. I want to see these young guys have to go do the same thing, because they've never seen the real Tiger. They've seen the watered down, injured Tiger. And if he gets back to even close to where he was back then, it's going to make for some fun stuff. So I was obviously short Tiger, made me look like an idiot, but if it means him playing well going forward, I'll take it. That was fun to watch.
Yeah, you were profitable shorting Tiger before, so inevitably, if you short him every week, it's going to pop up at some point. Number one in driving distance, like you mentioned. Saw him hit an 8-iron, like 190, like right next to the flag on one of the par threes. I mean, he was just swinging so smooth. And his short game, I mean, he could have made a lot more putts, honestly. He's been putting great up until this tournament, but his short game's dialed, and definitely looks like we might have, at least a competitive Tiger, which should be great for the game of golf.
For sure. All right. Well, let's get into this week's tournament. This is we have a World Golf Classic tournament in Mexico City. So first, before we get into the players, let's start talking about the course. We only have 1 year of data on this course. It moved from Trump National 2 years ago to this new course. I don't even know how to pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try.
Do it.
Club de Golf Chapultepec.
Oh, wow.
Is that bad?
Wow, are you part Mexican?
Yeah, it sounds like
You
it,
got
right?
some Spanish in your blood?
Sounds like it. So we don't have a lot of data on this course. It does just sort of eyeballing it. It looks like we have some smaller greens, so ball strikers could get an advantage. But I'm curious, Colin, what does the data say? Are you trusting the data? And I think an interesting angle is, we're in Mexico City, so we have high altitude. Does that favor bombers? Does it help everyone else? I think Pete and Sleeves might have good takes on this as well, playing in Colorado as well. So maybe not as exact similar course, but just like what sort of golfers high altitude helps. But Colin, I'll kick to you first on the course.
Well, first of all, I think we owe a rest in peace to the Puerto Rico Open, which is now being scheduled at the exact same time as WGC. It has always been my favorite event of the year because no one knows anybody that's been playing. It was basically custom built for player models because it was scraping the bottom of the barrel for the tour. I will miss it horribly in a good way. And I guess, all the rest of these will actually be properly televised going forward. So as far as this course, so we've had exactly 1 year of data on it so far. So course history should probably take a pretty significant ding because it's small sample size. That being said, in the 1 year that it was played, and exactly your point, Brian, it was at altitude. And maybe it's almost like a full circle logic, like this played out as a bomber's course. I could get talked into either one of your angles that you talked about. Either it supercharges bombers or it lifts up the accuracy guys who now have enough distance. But I think it's more of a multiplier effect. And this course played out as a bomber's course last year. I'm probably going to go forward also assuming it's a bomber's course this year. I'm sure we might see like a couple 400-yard drives, like some of the downhill holes or something like that. I think when it was Matt Kuchar was hitting 360-yard drives last year, you knew something was just inhuman or not working as God intended. So yeah, I think it's a bomber's course. Let's keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Distance helps bombers even more. Yeah. How does that you get for those of you guys that actually play in altitude? Does that roughly reconcile with how you think altitude plays out in general?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's I don't necessarily think altitude favors or doesn't favor a certain type of player, but I think it's the type of course at that altitude. So if you got a wide open course where you can hit driver after driver every hole, and there's no penalty for being crooked, then yeah, I would be a bomber on a altitude course just because my distance is going to be magnified over guys that I hit it, that hit it shorter than I am, and I'm going to gain an even bigger advantage. However, I don't think that I was looking at the leaderboard from last year, and like you said, we've only got 1 year to really check this course out, and it looked like a lot of dudes that played well last year are guys that hit the ball long, which was interesting because when I was talking to some of the guys who played in the event and what's the course like and stuff like that, they say it's kind of tree line. There's a lot of dog legs where you're hitting irons off the tees and things like that. So to see the guys at the top of the leaderboard last year, like Dustin and Rom, and I think Peters was up there. It's these are all guys that hit it really far, but from just talking with people, it didn't sound like that was the type of course that would be a huge advantage for those guys. So just in terms of altitude, I don't think it's necessarily one type of player plays well at altitude, one type of player doesn't. I think it's the type of course at altitude. Because if we're at altitude and I'm a long hitter and I got to hit 3-iron to the end of the dog leg, and the guy behind me is a short hitter, hits 3 wood to the end of the dog leg. At the end of the day, we're both I'm not hitting from any closer to the green than he is. And so there's no real advantage there. So I think it's more based on the type of course than the altitude in general.
So there's one curious question I have, and I've read a lot about this and tried to adjust. Obviously, playing most of my golf here in Colorado, most people say, oh, it's, you take 10%, you're basically hitting it 10% farther so you can drop down, but not every shot's the same. Sometimes the ball might go a little bit farther. Obviously, temperature is a big thing that we're tracking as well. How did you adjust to altitude, and do you have a rule of thumb, or how do you – because basically it's not always the same percentage depending on what club and what kind of shot you're hitting.
Yeah, it varies. So obviously, like on a shorter, if you're 80 yards out, then you're taking 10%. Like I'm not necessarily sure that shot's going to play like 72 yards. It's just at sea level. It's just too short of a distance to really factor it in. You know what I mean? But as you stretch it out further and further, you start to see those distances potentially like grow. So the way I would do it, and now it's way more fine tuned. But like, so if I was coming from sea level and going to somewhere in altitude or vice versa, I would hit full shots with each one of my irons and document exactly how far they were flying as closely as I could. And then when I got to the place that I was playing the tournament, I would hit those same clubs and document how far they were going there. So nowadays, guys will do that exact same thing with TrackMan, right? These guys are on TrackMan all the time. They know exactly how far their carry numbers are with each club. They'll have all those dialed out, like from the Honda or whatever. And when they go down here to Mexico and it's at 7,000 feet, they'll do the exact same thing on the range with TrackMan. They'll see exactly how much further their ball is flying, and then you can get like a percentage based off of that. Or they'll put like a chart in their yardage book, right? And they'll have every club like full swing numbers, how far they go. So when they get out there and they got that certain distance, they can look at their caddy, can look at their chart and be like, all right, dude, you were flying your 6-iron, 209 on the range. Like I think this is like a 205 shot. So, it's almost a full 6 or whatever it might be. But they'll have it. It's so different from what they're used to. They'll just try to normalize it in some way by having like the numbers in front of them and getting on TrackMan and that type of stuff.
Yep. Good discussion there. I think let's get into the players. Obviously, a very loaded field. This is a shorter field than usual. We only have 65 golfers, and as such, there is no cut. So we'll factor that into our analysis as well. Up at the top is DJ at 11.9 on DraftKings. He is the odds-on favorite with an implied win probability of 14.3%. He did win this last year. Seems to fit this course really well, as we've mentioned in our conversation about it. JT right below him, Rahm, Spieth, Fleetwood round out the guys in the 10K plus range. So let's start there. Let's start talking about some of the top guys who we like, who we think will be chalky, who might be good GPP pivots. Pete, I'll kick to you first on this one.
Yeah, I would be all over JT, except now I think his ownership's going to finally catch up with him. I've been playing a lot of JT this year, obviously dating back to last year. He's kind of been the stud that I've honed in on just because of how many birdies he makes. This week, it'll be interesting. Obviously, we've seen Dustin Johnson be very heavily owned on that California tour. He has great history out there, so I think that really boosted his ownership. I imagine it'll still be up there, but my favorite guy in this range is probably going to be Jon Rahm. I think Jon Rahm, obviously last year, played it well. Getting the discount of $1,300 versus DJ and basically $900, almost $1,000 on JT is really intriguing. Both he and Spieth are the two guys in the top range that I think will be a little lower owned. So curious, Colin, how you grade those two, but my initial lean would be Jon Rahm. I'm still trying to buy as much Jon Rahm as I can going forward. Obviously, he was heavily owned last year, but I think with the hype that JT's getting and what we've seen with the ownership on DJ, he might come in lower owned relative to where he was last year.
It's really tough to separate JT and DJ. You could make a case for either at their price. I think you're spot on when it basically comes down to which one is going to be less owned, and that's going to give you far more to work with. Rahm's an interesting. I actually would probably have right now Fleetwood a little bit over Rahm. Especially he may be a lot more heavily owned, but Fleetwood had a really good finish here and he came into this tournament as a much worse golfer. I think Fleetwood kind of overall right now is pretty far ahead of where he was this time a year ago and has a good enough finish to boot that I would probably give him a slight edge over Rahm. Now, I don't know, ownership of course makes all of this subject to change. And it's not like Rahm is that far below him. It's still John Rahm, and he can go off. And when he goes off, his upside is definitely there. But I wouldn't sleep on. I think it's basically the same decision as above. Like Fleetwood and Rahm, really close to one another. Probably depends more on ownership. And I think I could see Fleetwood being higher owned because he is cheaper. People will like point to his history. And, maybe like it does get a little bit tougher to build out other lineups with that extra 600 with Rahm. So, and then Spieth, like I just don't have in the same class as anyone here. I don't think he has enough distance to get to the level that these guys do. He's still good. I mean, he's still top of the field, but at a distance course, I definitely think his ceiling is a little bit more capped than all these other guys we talked about.
Yeah, I agree. I think Spieth is fifth in this top five here. Sleeves, where are you at on these top guys? Who are you buying this week?
Yeah, I'm with Peter. I like John Rahm for a lot of the reasons we mentioned. I know Colin probably's got about 3 or 4 South American mini tour players ranked over him going into this week. But I tend to like the guy. From what I see, here's what I got. He's last 6 events dating back to 2017 in Dubai. He's got 2 wins. Dubai, and then the PGA event at Palm Springs this year. He's got a runner-up at the Tournament of Champions, and his 2 worst finishes on the tour since last November are 29th at Torrey, where he was like leading or near the top going into the weekend, had a bad weekend, and 26th at Pebble, where he shot a 76 in the final round and dropped down as well. I mean, it's hard. I'm hard to bet against this guy, and I'll be the first to admit I'm a little bit biased just because of all these guys. John's the guy that I get to see regularly. I get to play with it and see it and watch it and kind of compare it to the other stuff that I've seen. And obviously physically, like I can run through all the stats and stuff. They're all really good. But the thing that separates John in my mind from some of these other guys, and I think it's not necessarily like John's not the only one who has it, but he's the only guy I really see it in consistently. But like, it's just the way he thinks. Like he physically, he can do all this stuff. So can DJ. So can Justin. All these guys. But the way John thinks, like I'll give you a specific example. Like John Rahm thinks and talks like he's the best player in the world, and sometimes it can come off like a little bit cocky and stuff. But I genuinely just believe he just believes it, and that's the way he is. So last year, prior to the Waste Management Open in Scottsdale, I was playing with John. We cruised around a quick 18 in the afternoon on Wednesday, the day before the tournament. So we're playing, and we're on the back nine. I pull out my phone, and I'm scrolling through the matchups. I want to see who everybody's matched up this week and ask them about it. So I pull it up, and I pull him up, and I'm like, "Oh, John, you're matched up against so and so." I'm not gonna say the guy's name, but he's matched up against a guy who's had an enormous career on the PGA Tour, a marquee name guy who's very big in the world of golf. And I was like, "Oh, John, you're matched up against so-and-so, you're plus 110. What do you think? Yeah, are you going to beat so-and-so tomorrow?" And he's like, straight face, no bullshit, no like joking around. He's like, oh, he cannot beat me. He has no chance to beat me. He does not drive the ball. This is my Spanish accent, by the way, in case you guys aren't picking up on that. But he's like, oh, he cannot beat me. He cannot drive the ball the way I drive the ball. I am much better around the greens. And my putting is way better than it's like, but it was like straight faced. It was not like there was no bullshit like joking around. He just was like, I was never been more convinced of anything in my life. I was like, holy shit, you're right. And I went and hammered him, and I bet a bunch on him, and he ended up beating the shit out of the guy, But I was like, there was like no joking about it. It was just straight up. This is what I think, and you can't tell me otherwise. And it's pretty hard to argue with that. With his reasoning when he's catapulted to number 2 in the world in the short time frame that he has. So until he starts playing bad, and this is the last thing I'll say about him, I think he loves the spotlight. I think he loves the big stage. I think he wants it. I think he's going to be an absolute behemoth in the Ryder Cups in years to come based on this kind of like, maybe it's a Spanish thing, right? You see it with Seve, see it with Sergio. These guys kind of come to life and stuff like that. But this kid, he wants the ball with the clock running down at the end of the game. He wants the big lights. And I think his game's all there, and I think he's going to be a monster. So anytime he's up there, and he was a lot cheaper than DJ too, and I was like, shit, I'd be happy to go with Rahm. So he's my blue chip guy.
I like it. Pete, let's quickly just talk about what we're doing with the abbreviated field. Only 65 golfers. Do you think that's going to change ownership? I'm inclined to think that maybe we shouldn't really treat the week that differently. Really, the big difference is that It's just a little bit thinner down low with some of the cheaper guys. But overall, the guys that people are usually going to roster are about the same prices, and they're all there in the same places. So I'm inclined to think it's not going to be that much different from a normal week ownership-wise. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in general, some of the value guys will be more heavily owned just because there aren't as many options, there aren't as many pivots. So that's something to be cognizant of. But the big thing, which we've talked about extensively on these no-cut events, is you're chasing the upside, which is another reason I just think Jon Rahm, obviously all the top-end guys have high ceilings relatively, but Jon Rahm, to me, just can go out and just win this tournament by a landslide. So I love the commentary from Sleaze, and we'll be targeting those high upside guys even more. The guys who are a little more volatile, have more missed cuts, but make a lot of birdies are definitely more enticing in this format.
Okay, well, let's dive into the 8 and 9K range. And Colin, I'll kick to you because we need to get all of your takes on Paul Casey, Justin Rose, Patrick Cantlay. These are all your boys right here.
This tier's stacked.
Chaz is on the board, bro. Get him.
This is a murderer's row of kind of like the mid-rangey guys. I think I could get talked into any one of them. So I think the five that stand out by far, Finau, Cantlay, Rose, Noren, and Casey. All of these guys are kind of Cantlay, I'm just going to if you want my opinion, just pick any podcast that I've done this year, and there's a guaranteed 5-minute segment on why Patrick Cantlay is underpriced for everything he does. I think I'll actually get consensus from everybody on this pod. I think we all like Cantlay for all of our different reasons.
Do you have him over on?
Let's not get crazy, but yeah.
You were getting crazy earlier, buddy.
Yeah,
you like Casey over on this week.
Rahm has enough history to kind of get the edge over everyone here, definitely in a head-to-head. And kind of on that note, I really do like Justin. We were all high in Justin Rose kind of coming into the year.
I like Justin too.
He gets dinged a little bit with his history here, so didn't have the greatest result last year. I don't give it too much weight because it's 1 year. I'd rather wait for a couple more to say that he's conclusively bad here. But God, he has all of the leading indicators for upside in top 25, especially if that's what you're chasing this week. Then it's really all that's going to separate you kind of coming in. The last time he did not place in the top 25 was back at the end of at the PGA Championship in August. And even that, everything is top 10 except for a 22nd in Europe, which is basically, a 55 here on the tour. But I don't know how he's gone this far under the radar, but he's putting up monster results across the pond that actually do translate pretty well. So especially at his price point, I think people will get scared off of his non-top 10 finish last year that I'm willing to discount more than most. I could see myself building a lot of lineups around Rose. And then everyone else, Paul Casey kind of has a similar story, been playing well. Secret's kind of out on Alex Noren. He's kind of in a similar spot where didn't finish great here last year, but I was definitely high on him last week as a leverage play. That worked great coming with a third place finish. And I could see him, I think a Rose Noren kind of anchor gives you a lot of flexibility to fill in a lot of other guys when most people will be going with a much more kind of store brand name players.
Yeah. Rose is so interesting. I built a preliminary model, early today to try to capture what I thought was important at this specific course. And Justin Rose is currently my top golfer. We'll see some things are going to change as far as incoming data and stuff like that. So we'll see what changes, but overall he does seem to be in a really nice spot this week. Sleaze, what are your thoughts on Rose and other guys in this range here?
Yeah, Rose is a monster. I think he's one of the kind of guys that he's good everywhere, like a Rahm or like a Spieth or something. You can't pinpoint a type of course and be like, oh, this is where Justin Rose plays well. He's just really, really good. I think the one thing that's held him back a little bit is his putting. Ever since you saw him win the major and he was putting conventional and now he's putting super upright, very similar actually to Adam Scott. If you look at the way he holds the putter, super upright, and he's got the little claw thing. I just hate seeing guys go to that type of stuff if they've had success in the past with the regular style putting. It just leads me to believe that there's a lot of doubt in there. Obviously everybody goes through stretches, good and bad putting, but It just seems unnatural and it seems kind of forced. And so the putter's the only bad thing I think you could say about Justin Rose, but otherwise his game is dynamite. The two guys I got, you already hit on a couple of them. Alex Noren, I got him 8,800. He's been incredible. He almost won at Honda this past week. Lost the playoff to Jason Day at Torrey, so he's damn near got 2 wins in his last 4 or 5 tour starts. He's not necessarily a bomber, which as we were talking about, I don't know if this course is a bomber's course or not, so I just tried to pick guys that I thought were great with the irons based on the dog legs and stuff like that, but his ball striking stats are phenomenal. I think he's a guy, too, if you look at his golf swing, kind of a unique swing. He really holds on to that angle for a super long time, try to eliminate the left side of the golf course. And I know he was a guy that struggled with the big hook for a long time, and I feel like he's maybe just now coming into his own where he's really got it all figured out, and that's why you're seeing him contending all the time. So I took Alex Noren, and my other guy is Tyrell Hatton. He's 8,600. He's been rock solid this year, too, minus an MC at Honda. So if you're looking for a negative on him, is that he's coming off a bad week. But since I hate that course so much at PGA National, I would give everyone a free ride down there. I think it should just be blown up off the map entirely. But, MC down there. But other than that, last 6 Euro Tour starts, hadn't finished outside the top 20. And he's not a guy we see a ton over here, but from the guys, talking with the guys who know him and have been around him, they say his iron game is nails, and he's a good putter as well. So those are kind of what I lean towards on this golf course. So Hatton and Noren are my 2 guys.
I like it. Yeah, Pete, you're right, man. This tier is absolutely loaded. Finau for me is, just like per his salary is, I think, one of the top plays of the week. And there's like guys around him that are really interesting pivots as well. I mean, it's just absolutely loaded. What are your thoughts on this tier?
So I think last week I brought up you could make some mid-tier lineups. Obviously that didn't work out. If you faded Justin Thomas, you're in trouble. This week, I mean, I can see a ton of merit in just loading up on this tier. There's so many great players. Hatton, one word of caution on him, as he did withdraw before with a wrist injury before the Honda. Claimed to be fine. I'm going to watch that, and that's something hopefully Sleaze we can lean on. That's a really hard thing to figure out is when the guy's hurt versus not hurt. In general, we've said if they're playing, they're fine, but obviously we know some of these guys try to battle through some of this stuff. So definitely keep an eye on Hatton. I agree with Sleaze that he is a great player in this field. Him and Noren are definitely the guys from Europe that we've been talking about for a while. So like the call, but just monitor the wrist injury there. I love Finau. He's another guy that I'm going to be taking a ton this year. He was one of the most heavily owned golfers on DraftKings last year. Guy has, just smooth, effortless power and has really kind of found his groove. I think he's going to be a top 15, top 20 guy and has a really high ceiling any week. So he's definitely up there. I think Casey makes a ton of sense, like we talked about. Love Justin Rose at the top. There's a couple obvious fades to me in terms of equity, which is interesting for ownership. Phil Mickelson, no chance I touch him at 9,300 when you can get guys like Noren, Cantlay, Hatton, Finau, Casey cheaper. But because of that, he might come in super low owned. So that's a intriguing tournament pivot. Sergio, didn't really do anything special last week. So he could be another low owned pivot. Bubba coming off a win. I mean, I don't know if I love him at this course, but we'll be curious to see how he plays. Everyone's going to be watching him for the Masters. So ton of great players here. Peters is one other guy that will garner some tournament attention. Obviously another really talented, effortless kind of power player. So, there's a ton of reasons to play a ton of guys in this range. And we didn't even get to talk about Loverboy Ches for Colin.
I'm so disappointed in you, Colin. I was expecting you to gobble that up so quick. I thought you might just play Ches 8 times. Your whole lineup, just a bunch of Cheses.
Ches hasn't played this course. He doesn't have a whole lot of distance. I can still remain objective when I have to for my job.
You're just trying to keep his ownership low right now.
I'm not there are plenty of other spots to pick Ches during the year. We got Sawgrass coming up. That's
licking your chops for that one. Yes.
Oh yeah.
I'm surprised I don't see like a Reeve poster in your background. Maybe like a Reeve Cantlay wall, something like that.
It's actually
like
just
little voodoo dolls
out of frame on this wall right here.
Yeah, like the life size cutout.
Yeah, like I have. Yeah, the fatheads, like, yeah, there's we'll do a flex podcast cribs one day, and I'll just kind of drag.
Oh, I
those
like
out
that.
in the
Perfect.
apartment.
Love it.
Yeah, Ches, I agree though. Just not the course fit. But one thing we've talked about is, the consensus around the daily fantasy industry is that this is a distance course. You can absolutely gain leverage in terms of ownership by taking some of the accuracy guys. So we'll see what the consensus is around the industry. But for right now, just in terms of equity, I think Ches is a fade, especially with some of these bombers that have really high equity right above them.
All right, let's dive into this value tier, and because it is in an abbreviated field, and because it's such a prestigious event, being a World Golf Classic event, we have a lot of talented golfers right in this range. I think Pete is right that we might see some high ownerships on some of these value guys. Colin, I'll kick right back to you for this one. Favorite guys in the tier, then thoughts on ownership for guys like Gary Woodland. I'm assuming that some of these guys are going to get pretty chalky.
Yeah, this is an interesting one from a couple different angles. And like chalky is such a relative term, like when it's such an abbreviated field. It's tough to find a guy like in any of these price ranges that are going to dip below, 5% that have a decent equity unlike any of these other places. I think the top of the value tier is headlined by two interesting cases, Gary Woodland and Brendan Steele, who definitely have the distance to compete, but did not do as well as they should have last year. I think people are pretty high on both of them at the time. Definitely underperformed. I can give that some discount, but not a whole lot considering just how far below the rest of the field they were. I don't know what to make of that. And then you have some other guys that have not played the course before. Xander and Russell Henley are both here. They seem to be mainstays in all of our value picks week to week. Henley had a pretty good result before. Xander was solid at Pebble. I don't know what their ownership is going to be, but they're always less than they should be. And then similarly, Webb Simpson, who I thought he played great last week. It's kind of interesting to see him down below here at 7,800. I think if this is a normal event, you probably see him in the mid-high eights. But just because it's such a star-studded field, he doesn't have quite the equity that he does elsewhere. But those are the guys I like the most. I could maybe get talked into Charlie Hoffman, but there are some weird injury concerns there. I know there was a back withdrawal and definitely did not play in LA at Riviera up to the level that his history expected. So I don't know if there's something else going on with Hoffman that is not priced into the stats. Hopefully Sleeves will be able to fill me in on that if there's anything he's heard from the rest of the tour.
I don't have any inside scoop on Charlie. I know he hasn't been playing as much or as well as he's accustomed to. So I can do a little deep dive and figure out what's going on there. But typically he'd be a guy that'd be, tailor-made for something like this. Hits it long enough and can just hits the ball well altogether. So I don't know what's going on with Charlie, but I will definitely find out.
Yeah, Charlie's an interesting one. My dad's favorite golfer calls him Smiling Charlie. Obviously, he's had some really good finishes and found his own over the last couple of years in terms of even starting off really hot at the Masters, contending more often. But this injury is a little concerning. I agree with you. Brendan Steele is the guy who stood out the most to me as kind of my top golfer, and then Gary Woodland was right there as well. I imagine they'll soak up ownership. One guy that I always seem to take more often than the field is Francesco Molinari. The one downside is he's not a bomber, but that could be a nice edge if more people are just taking bombers and he kind of goes low own again. He's just too good of a golfer to be 7,300. So he'd be the other guy that I'm looking at. Obviously didn't have a good finish at the Genesis, but please, who you got in this value tier?
Yeah, I'm a little bit different than you guys. So I know you guys are the numbers gurus and you got all the data and stuff, and you say it's a bomber's course, but just from talking with guys, I'm not necessarily convinced that it is. I think the leaderboard reflected that a little bit last year with the guys who were at the very top, but I was also able to find a good handful of guys in the top 10 and near the top 15 and stuff like that who don't necessarily bomb the ball at all. So my picks aren't necessarily steered towards guys that hit the ball far, but I went more with iron play and things like that. I mean, I was looking at the golf course. They said online that it's almost it's less than 7,400 yards, and it's at 7,000 feet. So I mean, that's like a 6,700 type of yard golf course if you're allowing for 10%, which I mean, that ain't long for anybody. So I don't care. You know, everybody's going to be hitting short irons at that distance. So anyways, the guys I went with, first off, my boy, Matt Cooch. He hasn't been quite as hot in 2018 as we've seen in years past. He's got only one top 10 in full field events, which was a fifth at the Phoenix Open. But this is why I picked him, kind of speaking on what I just said. So if you look at his stats, it's his driving stats that are really bad. His length is down. He's like 288 off the tee. And his accuracy is really bad too. So he's like 147th in strokes gained off the tee. If you put him on this course where there's a lot of dog legs and he's able to hit more irons and stuff like that, all of a sudden you eliminate that disadvantage that he's played with so far with the driver. And I love him on an equal playing field if he's sitting out there with whatever he's got, 8, 9s, wedges, things like that. Because he's the number 2 putter on PGA Tour right now. So if you're allowing him to play from the fairway, not from the rough, and somewhat close to the same distance as these other guys are playing from, I think he's a great pick and a guy that's definitely under the radar. You just haven't really heard from him. And in these picks for me, I tried to go with guys that played here last year. I think just speaking from a golf perspective, anytime you've played a golf course and you have experience on it is a big leg up on a guy who hasn't played it. That's why you see all these rookies come out on the PGA Tour talking about, it's my first time around this place. It's my first time seeing this place. And when they're going up against vets who have played 10, 15 years, it's a huge disadvantage. You just learn a lot of stuff in the tournaments that you can't learn in practice rounds. Like, oh, I remember when I air milled the green here last year and made double. Like, can't go long here. That's death. Or remember when I hit one. These are the type of stuff that I used to find. I remember when I duck hooked it out of bounds on this hole and made a 9. You know, like just little things that you pick up along the way, having played there, where the pin locations were and things like that. So I tried to pick my guys based on guys that have played here last year. And Kuchar had a top 20 here last year, so I thought he was a good value at 7,600.
Cool. Any responses?
Colin will agree with me probably.
Colin,
yep, sounds about right.
Yep, there it is.
I agree.
You're sounding smarter and smarter.
You copying again, Colin?
Good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Touche.
Well said. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting tier, and I think Slee's made some really good points on them. Kuchar, you know, historically we've taken at these events where there is a cut because Kuchar, even when things go badly, he really grinds and he's such a great cut maker. Historically has been priced up, and we haven't taken him as much in these type of events. But especially if the narrative's going to be bombers, I think a ton of people are going to kind of look past Cooch and think of him more as a consistency guy than someone with upside. So I think that's a really interesting angle for ownership as well in DFS. And another really nice thing about Kuchar is he's the same exact price as both Woodland and Leishman, who I didn't talk about. And I could see Leishman being somewhat heavily owned as well. So I really like that call. The challenging part for me, guys, is do you see anyone under 7K that you could actually roster?
Oof. Yeah, no, I mean,
I don't even know like half of these guys. And
where's the first Steve's under 7K? I guess the only one I could like kind of like, I think the most heavily owned will be someone like Jonathan Vegas because like he's the only name that anyone recognizes. Outside of that, like if you want to get sneaky, like I could maybe justify like Dean Burmester from like who plays mostly in South Africa and is just like
he's a bomber.
He used to be a mainstay at my favorite tournament, the Puerto Rico Open, because they're open, bombs at a country mile, and definitely sets up fine for the course. But like, God, it is just thin on like actual competition against any.
Number 1 in driving distance, Chan Kim, 6'6", cheapest guy in the field. So there you go.
That's going to be a data. There's some horrible field adjustment that has not been made. So
he got 11th at the PGA, I believe, right?
Is that true?
I think it is.
Some tournament in Japan, he was driving at 350 off the tee. I mean, throw that thing out. The Fujin.
Yeah, there's some Coors Field inflation there.
He got 11th at the British last year.
Okay, all right. Well, that's still legit, but like, yeah, this is all Asian PGA and Japan Tour stuff. So
I was just joking, but he is number 1 in the field in driving distance. So whatever.
So there's no cheap guys to take under 7K. So that just leads to some certain roster construction. So be very cognizant of that when you're making GPP lineups. This is a week where you definitely need to get leverage. One thing you can do on Fantasy Labs that we've talked about a ton that makes a ton of sense, especially this week. make sure if you're filling out a bunch of teams, set your maximum cap at like 49.9%. Worst thing you can do is spend all the salary. There's going to be a lot of duplicate lineups. So for tournaments, you can gain a bit of an edge just making sure your lineup is unique.
Well said. Yeah, last week, 49% of the field in the $33 dog leg used the full 50K cap. So maybe one of the biggest edges right now in PGA golf for sure. Any other thoughts? You guys just want to get to some picks and we'll get out of here.
Let's get to winners. And Sleaze has been modest this podcast. Colin has been throwing a lot of.
What do you mean, Peter? What are you even talking about?
I think you picked the winner. One appearance on the Fantasy Flex.
One appearance, Fantasy Flex, one winner,
We gave him bumper bowling last week.
Playing the tips, I picked Bubba 40-1. I mean,
it doesn't even count. Like anybody can take Justin Thomas and sound smart. Let's actually follow.
Oh my God! Well, you should have done it then instead of Ricky, whoever you picked, the number one favorite, bro. You gotta step out of your box once in a while.
Really well in bumper bowling, Sleeves.
Take a chance. Mm-hmm. Right is right, whether he's a favorite or not. I'll go with I'm 1-0. You're 0-1.
We're going back to prison rules, the way God intended.
I feel like based on this trash talking, we're in for a good Sleaze golf podcast. Playing the tips, sorry.
Playing the tips, lot to speak on there.
I've been suppressing everything.
It's been really hard for me to bite my tongue over.
This is the civil version. This is the one you listen to at work. But playing the tips is definitely like flex after dark.
Not suitable for work.
It's gonna get weird.
I'm excited. Yeah, definitely check that out. You guys are recording tomorrow, I believe. Tomorrow being Wednesday, so definitely check that out. All right, so Sleaze, you got to go last since you won last week.
Yeah, winner goes last type of deal.
And we'll give Colin first pick since he's struggling against you, Sleaze. Pete, you can go second. I'll go third.
Come on, Colin. Make one good pick, bro.
It's a coin flip here, but yeah, I'm going boring chalk, and I'm gonna go DJ.
Damn it.
Well, Ricky last week, DJ this week. He's picked the number one favorite both week. Oh, my God. And he's telling me to step out. He's giving me shit for picking Justin to win. Oh, my God. Credibility gone. Next. Peter, you go. Give me something.
I'm going to stick with my guns. I'm going to say Rom. Hard to win back-to-back weeks. JT also one other narrative we didn't talk about. You know, he's getting just blown up on social media. I saw Ricky with all those girls. I think JT might have had a little bit of fun after winning, and now he's got all the social stuff to deal with. So I'm going to fade that and go with John Rahm.
I think that is that could be smart, but I'm not going to fade him. So I'll go JT.
There you go. I'm going with my man Peter. I'm going with John Rahm as well. Picked him as my blue chip, just like I picked Justin last week. He won. Looking more from Rahm. Got to get on the course with him this week. Got his brain dialed in. I did a little mental work with the kid. I feel like he's really ready to go. He's really poised for greatness, so I'm rolling with Rahm.
The real question is, who won out of you guys? Did he take you down?
Talking about it. It's not like I don't want to – it's like client-patient privilege type shit. You know what I mean? I can't divulge everything we work on. Maybe I hit some bad shots. Maybe he hit some better shots. I don't know. Toss-up at the end of the day. Weren't keeping score.
Also, it's great that you took Rahm, but it's a snake draft, so you can't take Rahm since Pete took him.
Oh, shit.
You can take Rahm on the playing the tips. Yeah, it is a snake draft.
Okay, I'll take him on playing the tips. All right, if we're going no Rahm, DJ's gone. Justin's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Who else are the blue chippers we got up there?
You got Spieth and Fleetwood. Then you got Rose, Fowler.
Yeah.
I'll take Spieth. That's a boring pick too, but like the kid – I think there's a little hunger there. When you see your buddies start having success, same way Justin elevated his game after Spieth was like the it kid winning everything, and now Justin's kind of taking a little bit of that shine. I think there's some good competitive juices that get flowing when those two guys are playing well for the other one. So I'll go with Spieth to come back over the top and follow up JT.
All right, you got a little screwed going last there, but you get a benefit of going first. Anyone who's under 9,000, you can pick as a winner.
Anyone under $9,000, I'll go Alex Noren.
Yeah, that's the chalk.
That is the chalk.
I like that call. I'm gonna go.
Wait, Brian's up.
Brian's up. Dang it.
I'm going Cantlay. He's taking it down.
Yes, Colin. If you don't take Ches at this very moment, you're dead to him forever.
Pete's up.
He's
here.
Listening.
I'm taking Casey.
Ooh, Colin likes that too.
God, Finau faded all of you guys. I did not see that one coming. Yeah, I'm going Finau.
That's a good one.
I like
Chez will be pissed, but that's a good one.
Sawgrass, telling you.
You're waiting for him. I like that. Got it mapped out.
Pick your spots, just like you can only control what the defense gives you.
Yeah.
All right.
You're going to be about 0-5 at that point, so you're going to need winners.
Sounds about right.
Oh, man. All right. We will end it there. Thank you guys for listening. Sleeves, thanks for coming back on. You guys are recording tomorrow, so everyone definitely
I think we actually might be recording tonight, but it'll be out tomorrow for sure. Playing the tips will be out on Wednesday.
Yep. Tune in, listen to Colin, and hijack all my picks, and just piggyback everything I say and take no stance. It'll be good.
I can't wait
for this Colin, episode. I love you. You're great.
Can't wait for this episode. We're starting
like
early.
I said, I'm saving it all for Flex After Dark.
Flex After Dark.
We may actually finally have to get like the curse word like sound effect button on here, just like have the horn ready. No, we actually don't mute profanity here. Like not after 8 p.m.
There you go.
Kids listening.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. Good luck this week, and we'll talk to you guys next week.